and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence.
And I'm Meg Hofdahl.
And today we're talking about Phantasm. Meg, have you seen this movie?
So this is my first time seeing this movie. So that was kind of exciting because, it's just one of those things where I'd seen the cover at the video store. I don't know why I never went for it, but I knew nothing about it. I didn't know what kind of horror movie it was going to be. So I just completely went into it blind.
So did I. I had never seen this movie. This is my first watch. And same thing. I always saw the cover. And for some reason, I was like, I don't want to rent that movie. But I ended up not hating it.
Yeah, I mean, I felt kind of mixed about it. The way I kind of described it, I was telling my husband about it, is like there were some really good highs in it that I really liked. But then between the highs, I felt like there were some kind of boring lows. Like it was kind of a peaks and valleys movie for me where there was some stuff I was like, oh, that's really cool. But then there were points where I was like almost nodding off because it was a bit talky and a bit boring.
So this movie's directed by Don Coscarelli, and he is one of my favorites, one of my favorites, Bubba Hotep. He directed that with Bruce Campbell. And I remember when Bruce Campbell was promoting Bubba Hotep, we got to see the Midwest premiere in Chicago. He was saying, like, this is a master of horror. And I did not appreciate that at the time.
Yeah, I certainly didn't either. But it was very cool to watch Bubba Hotep on the big screen when Bruce Campbell was there. And yes, it is one of my favorite movies. I haven't seen it in a while. I'd love to rewatch it and sort of relive that because it's just a great sort of gonzo, wacky, but also strangely chilling movie.
And I think, we can do what we want, but I think we should revisit Bubba Hotep sometime because we might as well.
If he can push the boundaries in Phantasm, we can push the boundaries on Horror Rewind.
You've inspired us. So this movie came out in 1979. It's 71% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It had a budget of $300,000 and it ended up making $12 million at the box office. A couple of interesting facts. He made this movie out of love and just filmed on the weekends. So they filmed on weekends for like 3 years.
That's amazing. And I can see how it's sort of become this cult movie, and I can see the sort of passion and the and also the low budgetness of it, which I don't hate. I think if you can go out and make a horror movie, and sometimes when you have a low budget, you have to kind of work with it, and it makes you a more creative director. And clearly, this worked out for him. So I could see it definitely as a love project.
This movie is said to have inspired many things in pop culture. The first, Wes Craven said he's directly inspired by Phantasm. Freddy Krueger came inspired by Phantasm. Slender Man and the Tall Man both have similarities. And J.J. Abrams said he named Captain Phasma after this movie because he loves the Phantasm film so much. So even Star Wars. Oh, and the Jawas look similar to something in Phantasm. And even though Star Wars was released first, the Jawa scenes, or the Jawa-looking scenes, were filmed pre-1977.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I noticed that there was a similarity there. And I also saw that when I watched the movie on Shudder that J.J. Abrams was involved in the remastered edition of Phantasm. So that's very cool. I'd love to see the support for, a movie like that. Oh my gosh. I think for me, when this movie like really started for me was when the tall man picked up the coffin. And he just picks it up kind of like with one arm. And that's when I kind of like woke up and was like, that was creepy,
Yeah, there's a lot of creepy imagery and things that, and I love the perspective of like the kid. Like if you had seen this when you were a kid, you would have got the heck out of there.
Yeah, for sure. Although I think something that's so fun in horror movies is often the kid's curiosity sort of gets them into even more trouble. And obviously that's what happens here. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there were these moments that I was like, oh my God, that was so cool. Like, when the first, and I don't know, there's probably a term for what they're called, but that sphere thing, when it gets the first person and all the blood, yeah, that sphere ball thing. When it gets the first person and there's so much blood, and then the guy actually ends up peeing himself, and it's sort of this like, it almost made me feel a Twin Peaksness a little bit. It just had like this sort of odd, bizarre, but very creepy feeling to it, and that was one of my favorite things. So there was just these great little moments like that peppered throughout. I think the one thing that I noticed in this movie was, and I wasn't surprised when I went on IMDb and most of these people did not have a lot of credits, was that the acting was really bad.
Yeah, it's amateur actors that did it for free or barely anything on weekends. So, you could tell, but at the same time, I don't always hate that.
No, and I mean it was okay. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way sometimes. The one time I was like, oh my gosh, I wish Bruce Campbell was in the scene. Was the bug scene when they're fighting that great bug, which I did love, when they're fighting it down the stairs. And obviously it's all them physically, acting as though they're fighting this bug. I was like, somebody like Bruce Campbell would have sold the hell out of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, any movie would be better with Bruce Campbell. Now, Don Coscarelli was inspired by American culture and how we view and handle death compared to other countries and cultures, and the role and job of a mortician, and how we in American culture, what funerals have become. And I think that all that stuff is fascinating. And I know you as a writer, you're intrigued by it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a perspective of I don't believe in an afterlife. So death kind of has this like maybe different meaning for me than for people who maybe do believe in an afterlife. And yeah, I guess I've always been fascinated by it and what it means and how we treat it. And like I even went through that goth phase where I wanted to be a mortician. And like recently watching Haunting of Hill House, that was another theme in that about open caskets opposed to closed caskets. And when I was watching this movie, I was loving the big house, the setting, and then like there's this idea of when they go down into the mortuary, how it ends up being like a portal, and isn't that kind of what we all think? I mean, maybe not me, but a lot of people believe that death is just a portal to another dimension, so to speak. So I think there was some heft there in an amateur horror movie, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the theme. And Haunting of Hill House, it reminded me of that. And then also the I'm Not a Serial Killer movie that was filmed in Minnesota.
Yeah, it actually made me think of that too. Like, sort of like how our culture, how we sort of like, we revere, we take care of dead bodies as though the person is still inside them. And we try to show respect and things like that to the dead body. So, by what they do, behind closed doors at this mortuary, how they're shrinking down people and using them for, I guess, was it sort of like slave labor?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I think I'm following this. How there's this sort of element of how much worse it is because like for instance the kid is like, wait a minute, what about my parents? Like he's disturbed thinking about their bodies being used in this way. And so it kind of like shows in our culture like how much the body still matters.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people don't want to be cremated because it's like, no, you can't destroy my body. Yet, the body's not going to last, in the ground.
I mean, and there's like this great scene in Haunting of Hill House where, they kind of actually describe what they do to the body. And I mean, it's not pretty. And it's still one of those things that it's like, Oz behind the curtain. It's like most of us are not strong enough to really look behind that curtain. I mean, I write horror for a living and I don't think I could handle 2 minutes in a mortuary.
Yeah, it's not something I would seek out. The title Phantasm comes from an Edgar Allan Poe story. Are you familiar?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I'll have to go back and look. I don't know which story it comes from.
But it's just since this has been around since 1979. Like I just take for granted, like, oh, this was inspired by, of course, something else, Master of Horror.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm curious, and it's a great word.
There's a couple creepy things about the tall man. I mean, you mentioned the casket, but his arms swing wrong when he walks, and he's got yellow blood. Did you notice that?
I love that. It was like nacho cheese. I love that. See, that was one of those moments where I got really like psyched up. I was just like, yes. That because it was like this sci-fi. That's when you realize you're kind of in a sci-fi horror movie, which aren't always, that's not always my favorite subgenre, but actually I think they pulled it off well in this one. But yeah, I enjoyed I enjoyed those little like creepy touches that are just unnerving.
So I was thinking this brother, when he was trying to get his older brother to believe him and he was going to show him the finger, I thought the finger wasn't going to be in there and he wouldn't believe him for a while, but it was in there and it turned into the bug and everything. So it actually didn't go the way I feel like a lot of stories do.
Yeah, I mean, if you can say anything about this movie, like even if somebody watched it and they didn't like it, they would have to admit it was not predictable. Like it did not go the way you thought it was gonna go ever. Yeah.
I thought it was so beautifully shot for hardly any budget and amateurs. There were so many beautiful visual moments and I loved the music.
Yes, that's a really good point. The music was very 70s, but very haunting. And there were some really pretty shots. Like I said, I was obsessed with that house. I was just like, oh my gosh, I want to set a story there. Like, it was so beautifully shot.
I can see why this movie is a cult classic and so many people love it. I think if I had seen it when I was younger, I would have that nostalgic feeling for it and it would have been like one of those movies that was important to me still to this day. But because I didn't, I have a different view of it, which is fine. But do you understand the cult hit of it?
I definitely see the cult hit part of it and that it's unique and it's its own thing, which is very cool. I think that sort of like when we try to guess if we would be nostalgic about something, one thing that we always kind of mention is the female aspect of it, and this movie has very little to none. So I would say, I'm definitely going to be docking it for points on that. Obviously, it's a movie of its time, and that wasn't the main concern. But unfortunately, there was basically no females.
Yeah, I wrote, like, I wish there were more female characters with more to do because I can't even remember now offhand the females that were in it. They didn't have major roles.
And I mean, he is a female, right? Like he turns into one, I think, right? And then that's when the boob shots happened, So, and those were like, those were kind of thrown in, and I know that was kind of what was happening at the time, but I feel like the movie was probably better than that. It was kind of like, oh, that was cheap.
The brother, Jody, I feel like he looks like a matinee idol, but he's only done 10 films, 4 of them being Phantasm movies.
Yeah, I noticed that. Like I said, when I went to the IMDb, I was surprised how many people like didn't have like headshots up. Like it was a lot of like gray, icons. So yeah, I mean, I think it came down to acting. This is one of those movies that stuck out to me as like the writing and the concepts and the directing, which they weren't perfect, but they were better than the acting.
Yeah, true. I guess I had read about it, or I was reading about it as I was watching it, and so I kept getting blown away by the fact that Don Coscarelli just did this as this passion project on this low budget, filming on the weekends, which I think is amazing. And I kept noticing like, oh, the little brother does look a little bit older because kids age quicker than adults do. And I was not expecting to like it. I was like, no, there's no way I'm going to like Phantasm. But I really enjoyed it.
Good. I'm glad. I think I'm a little more reserved about it because for me, like I said, it was peaks and valleys for me where I would get really excited about something and then for like the next 20 minutes I was kind of in a low valley.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. So the sequel, there are 4 sequels to Phantasm. Phantasm 2 came out in 1988. Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead, came out in 1994. Phantasm 4, Oblivion, came out in 1998. And then the most recent one, Phantasm 5, Ravager, came out in 2016, 2 years ago. So we've got some catching up to do.
Yeah, I guess we do. I would be curious to see them. I definitely would be curious to see like what they are like and if they sort of go into more about that portal and that world, or if, it's more about watching the tall man on this side of the portal or what's happening. But yeah, I'd be very curious to see what's happening in those.
Apparently also there's books and comic books based off of this. And originally Don Coscarelli said he thought the story was contained and he told the story he wanted to tell, but it was more popular than he expected, and so he ended up writing these sequels. How do you feel about writing a sequel to something that maybe you've already contained your story, or you feel like you told your story already?
I've just done that.
So tell us about the process. Like, how do you reconcile that?
I think the hardest thing for me, so when I originally wrote my first novel, Her Dark Inheritance, I was like, I think this is a fully formed story and it has a beginning, middle of it, and end, and it does. And I wasn't planning on writing more. And then a discussion with my publisher, it was like, let's write more. And so I think the biggest struggle was taking a character that I felt had already gone through their character arc and taking them through another character arc is probably the toughest thing. Because the world itself, like the world of Phantasm, for example, I mean, there's so much there. So there was a lot for him to mine, I'm sure. But I think it's the toughest if you're using the same characters because, in my novel, I felt like I took Daphne, my main character, exactly where she needed to be. So bringing her on another journey and having her learn more life lessons, that's the hardest challenge.
And I suppose, too, writing for a TV series that, you have to create episodes. Not that your book is like this, but like when somebody has to write 22 episodes as opposed to 8, it's like what story is being told. That's why I love TV or books that tell that story and tell it well versus like filler.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking recently about like why TV shows don't need to go on for 10 seasons. It never ends well. And really when a TV show is a couple seasons, like Lost, for example, I think would have ended on such a higher note if it had gone out sooner. But at that time, and even like shows like The X-Files, it's like people were still watching it. They were still getting ratings. So the, network is like, just keep making them. But the story suffers. So, I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough balance of making sure you provide enough for the fans of the original, especially like I'm sure something like Phantasm that has cult following. I would be curious to know what Phantasm fans think of all the sequels.
Yeah, true. And is it exploring that world more? Which sometimes, like, okay, for example, Ash versus Evil Dead. I will watch Ash do anything, like for any amount of time. I am happy with the 3 seasons we got, but I could have kept watching that.
Oh, yeah, I definitely would have. And I mean, a big part of that is because the world that's set up in Evil Dead, it's not that it's so necessarily unique or different. It's Bruce Campbell. It's Ash. I mean, he is what makes it wonderful. Obviously, I love the blood and the guts and the gore and the dead and all of that. But oftentimes, I find with anything I'm watching, it's the character.
So let's rank this movie on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being you hated it, 10 being it's a perfect movie. What is the scale? I mean, the obvious thing seems like the silver ball, but do you have something more clever?
I was thinking the little bug or nacho cheese fingers.
Yeah, yeah, let's do those. And so tell us what do you give this movie?
Okay, so I'm going to explain. I'm going to give it a 6.5 because I really they had those peaks and I was like, yeah, but the acting kind of fizzled for me and took me out of the movie and I was having a little trouble like engaging, and also there's just no women, and when there was a woman, it was just a boob shot. And just, yeah, some of those valleys were a little bit boring for me.
So I'm doing this new thing where I'm writing down my ranking immediately after I watch it, because I'm like, that's going to be the truest, like, how do I feel right now without ruminating on it? And I gave it a 9 out of 10. That's how much I enjoyed watching it. I do have the same problems that you had, but for some reason, like, I think maybe my expectations were so low that I was pleasantly surprised.
It can often be, I've found through this process, especially of Horror Rewind, that sometimes it's always about expectation, but also it's about the day you're having. It's about the time you're watching the movie. It's about what's going on in your life. It's about if you are able to engage in it or not. And I think, and also just personal preference things too. But it's funny how I'm finding those things matter too.
Yeah. And I was in a great mood that day. So lucky for you, Phantasm fans. No, I'm just kidding. I did enjoy it. And now your Jack Russell is growling at me. Sorry.
Oh my God, who knew he was he must be growling at me because he's a Phantasm fan. He was like, you just can't appreciate unique sci-fi horror, Meg.
Cookie, what do you have to say about this? I hope it got that, just like that.
Sniffle.
Yeah, that little, when they're interviewing the police dog, that little clip. It's like, what do you have to say about this? And he's like,
Except he has never done anything to save anybody or help anyone. He literally has Chick-fil-A sauce on his nose from 2 days ago.
you're pathetic. The holidays are coming up. I mean, we've already been in holidays, but if you're looking for some gifts for the horror lover in your life or for yourself, because you know what? Treat yourself.
Treat yourself. That's our motto.
Then you need to check out Meg's website, meghofdahl.com. She's got her books there for sale and also her list of appearances, so you can go and buy books from her in person. And then you should also stop by the Gothic Gifts Etsy page and pick up something from my shop.
You guys, her Gothic Gifts shop is so cute. If you haven't gone, pillows, bags, jewelry, like so much cute stuff. It's affordable and it's for the horror connoisseur, I will say.
One of the most popular newer items is the Shining themed skirt, which Meg, you were the first to get that item, and you've gotten so many compliments every time you wear it.
Oh yeah, I'm the prototype, and it's been great because I mean, let's be honest. The fabric from The Shining, nobody probably wants to do their whole living room upholstery in it. It's very 70s, but to wear that skirt and have people know what it is and point it out.
You find your people that way.
Exactly, you find your people. So, yeah, I absolutely love it. It's just like this nice, subtle wink to The Shining. And if people don't know what it is, they just think you have a geometric skirt. So I love it.
And that's the thing I love about the Evil Dead magnifying glass necklace too. It's like, why are you wearing a magnifying glass around your neck? Do you need that to read fine print? Well, maybe. Or I just love Bruce Campbell.
I mean, just think of like how hot you'd look if you just like bring it up to your eye and just like look at the menu.
Some people, when I've been places, some people have bought it for that purpose. And you know what? You go, girl.
Yeah, that's fine. They're going to get like Evil Dead fans. Be like, oh my God.
It's fine. I think I even list on the Etsy, like you could start small fires with it too. So whatever is your pleasure.
Like for the survivalists out there.
And also, like Meg, from last Christmas and Hanukkah, you didn't have your novel out yet, so now this is the perfect gift if you haven't gotten it yet.
That's right, for the reader in your family, and if they don't like horror, just get it for them anyway.
They'll never know with the axe on the cover.
Yeah, it's not at all obvious. But yeah, wrap it up in a bow and tweet me if you give it as a gift. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope that you are having a warm week wherever you are. And until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.